I never considered myself the type to obsess over sports. Growing up in Cleveland, where heartbreak came as regularly as lake effect snow, I'd learned to keep my expectations low. But something changed last spring when the Browns made that miracle playoff run. For the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to dream big, to imagine what it would be like to watch my team play in the Super Bowl. Man, if they actually make it all the way I'm going, I told my buddy Mike over beers at the Rusty Anchor. No matter what it costs. That was 8 months ago. The Browns didn't make it, of course. Some dreams take longer, but the seed had been planted. I decided then and there that I would attend the next Super Bowl regardless of who was playing. This wasn't just about football anymore. It had become something more profound, a personal milestone I needed to achieve. So I started saving. Every extra shift at the auto shop, every side gig fixing computers for neighbors, every birthday check from my grandmother, all of it went into my Super Bowl fund. I cut back on everything. No more takeout, switched to the cheap beer, even moved to a smaller apartment to save on rent. Some of my friends thought I was crazy, especially when I turned down weekend trips to put another $100 away. It's just a game, Danny, my sister Jen would say, shaking her head. But she didn't understand. None of them did. Each night before bed, I'd check my savings account balance and calculate how much closer I was to my goal. I read every article about Super Bowl experiences, joined forums where fans shared tips about getting tickets, and watched countless YouTube videos of past games. I'd fall asleep imagining the roar of the crowd, the brilliant lights, the electricity in the air. By December, I had enough for a decent seat. The game was scheduled for Atlanta, and I'd already researched the cheapest flights and found a guy on Reddit willing to split a hotel room. All I needed now were the tickets. The official lottery was a bust, no surprise there, but I kept at it. I joined every waitlist, checked resale sites hourly, and eventually connected with a season ticket holder from Kansas City who couldn't make the trip due to a family wedding. After some back and forth and a nerve-wracking wire transfer that had me sweating bullets, the tickets were mine. 2 of them. Actually, I figured I'd invite Mike since he'd listened to me ramble about this dream for months. When they arrived in the mail, I couldn't believe it. I held them up to the light, ran my fingers over the holographic NFL shield, and even smelled them, like new money and fresh ink. These weren't just tickets, they were tangible proof that dreams could become reality if you wanted them badly enough. I didn't trust leaving them around my apartment. My neighborhood wasn't bad, but why take chances? So I stored them in a locked drawer in my childhood desk at my dad's house. I had moved out years ago when he remarried, but still had a room there where I'd crash occasionally after Sunday dinners or holiday gatherings. Dad had always been supportive of my Super Bowl quest, even offering to chip in, which I politely declined. This was something I needed to accomplish on my own. Keeping them safe for you, he'd said with a wink when I showed him where I'd hidden them. Nobody's gonna find those tickets there. As the big day approached, my excitement grew to almost unbearable levels. I'd already requested the time off work, arranged for a neighbor to feed my cat, and packed and repacked my weekend bag multiple times. I even bought a new jacket, nothing fancy, just something that wouldn't make me look like a complete out-of-towner. At night, I'd lie awake imagining every detail, the moment I'd walk into the stadium, the first glimpse of the field, the national anthem, and the flyover. I pictured myself high-fiving strangers when a touchdown was scored, sharing that unique bond that exists between fans in a moment of collective joy. Sometimes I'd get so wound up thinking about it that I'd have to get up and walk around my apartment until the adrenaline subsided enough for sleep. Just 2 more weeks, I'd whisper to myself. 2 more weeks and you'll be there. I even started a countdown app on my phone, watching the days, hours, and minutes tick away. Each morning, I'd wake up and check it before doing anything else. It became a ritual, a daily reminder that this wasn't just another pipe dream that would evaporate like morning mist. This was real. This was happening. The tickets became almost sacred objects in my mind. Occasionally, I'd drive to Dad's house just to check on them, opening the drawer to make sure they were still there, still real. I'd hold them for a moment, then carefully return them to their hiding place, the anticipation building with each visit. You're obsessed, Jen teased me when I mentioned my third trip in 2 weeks to visit Dad. She knew exactly why I was going. It's cute, though. I haven't seen you this excited about anything since you got that Nintendo 64 when we were kids. She was right. This feeling, this pure, unfiltered excitement, was something I hadn't experienced in years. Adulthood has a way of tempering expectations, of teaching you that dreams often lead to disappointment. But not this time. This time, I had done everything right. I had worked, saved, planned, and persevered. In 2 weeks, I would be sitting in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, watching the biggest sporting event in America unfold before my eyes. And no one, absolutely no one, could take that away from me. The Sunday before the big trip, I headed to Dad's for our usual family dinner. These gatherings had become somewhat tense affairs since my father married Diane 3 years ago, but I showed up dutifully, trying my best to keep the peace. Dad deserved happiness after Mom passed, even if his choice in partners left something to be desired. That afternoon was no different, Dad grilling steaks in the backyard, Diane making passive-aggressive comments about my apartment, my job, my perpetual singlehood. I'd developed a thick skin over the years, letting her remarks slide off me like water. What did it matter? In less than a week, I'd be living out my dream while she'd still be here, brewing discontent in her perfectly decorated suburban home. I thought I'd swing by tomorrow to grab those tickets, I told Dad as we washed dishes after dinner. Don't want to wait until the last minute. He nodded, passing me a plate to dry. Smart thinking. You all packed and ready to go? Almost, I replied, unable to suppress my grin. Just need to pick up some travel-sized stuff and I'm set. Diane appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Tickets for what? Dad. And I exchanged glances. I hadn't discussed my Super Bowl plans with her, partly because she never showed interest in my life and partly because, well, I didn't want to hear her opinions on how I spent my money. Danny's going to the Super Bowl, Dad explained, a hint of pride in his voice. Been saving up for months. Diane's eyebrows shot up. The Super Bowl? Those tickets must have cost a fortune. They weren't cheap, I admitted, but it's worth it. Once-in-a-lifetime experience. She made that sound, that little that somehow conveyed an encyclopedia of judgment before turning and walking away. I rolled my eyes at Dad, who gave an apologetic shrug. Same old Diane. The next day after work, I drove straight to Dad's house. He usually worked late on Mondays, but Diane's car was in the driveway. I considered coming back later but decided against it. This would be quick, just in and out. I used my key to let myself in, calling out a perfunctory hello that echoed through the foyer. No response. Fine by me. I headed upstairs to my old bedroom, eager to retrieve my tickets and finalize my preparations for the trip. The moment I opened my bedroom door, I knew something was wrong. Call it intuition or just the heightened awareness that comes from protecting something precious, but I could sense a disturbance in the room. I hurried to the desk and yanked open the drawer where I'd hidden the tickets. Empty. My heart dropped like a stone. I rifled through the drawer once, twice, desperately hoping they had just shifted position or slipped beneath some papers. Nothing. I pulled the drawer completely out, turning it upside down on the bed. Still nothing. Looking for something? I spun around to find Diane standing in the doorway, one shoulder leaning against the frame, arms crossed. Something in her expression, a subtle smugness, a barely concealed satisfaction, made my blood run cold. Where are they? My voice came out strangely calm, belying the panic rising within me. She tilted her head. Where what? You know exactly what. My Super Bowl tickets. They were in this drawer. Oh, those. She examined her manicured nails. I moved them somewhere safe. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by irritation. I need them back. Now. Diane straightened, her posture shifting subtly. You know, Danny, I've been thinking. It's really not appropriate for someone your age to be wasting money like this. A Super Bowl? Do you know how many mortgage payments that could cover? My irritation hardened into something sharper. It's my money, Diane. I earned it, I saved it, and I'll spend it how I see fit. Such entitlement, she sighed, as if addressing a petulant child. This is exactly what's wrong with your generation. No financial responsibility. Cut the crap and give me my tickets. The calm was evaporating now, replaced by a growing dread. I'm not playing games. Her expression changed then, the pretense of concern giving way to something harder, colder. You do not have the right to go to this show. I will go in your place, you can count on that. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. What are you talking about? Those tickets are mine. Are they? The envelope was addressed to this house. They were found in this house, in a room that belongs to this house. Her voice took on a mocking edge. And you should be grateful to have a roof over your head at all. You're in my house, Danny. Then she laughed, actually laughed, a sound so devoid of warmth it seemed to drop the temperature in the room. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, as the full impact of what was happening hit me. My stepmother had stolen my tickets I'd saved for 8 months to buy, tickets that represented more than just a sporting event, but a personal victory over the mundane constraints of everyday life. This is insane, I managed finally. Dad would never allow this. Your father understands the importance of family unity, Diane replied smoothly. He agrees that we should enjoy this opportunity together. After all, we so rarely get to take vacations with his work schedule. I felt sick. I don't believe you. Let me talk to him. He's in meetings all afternoon. I'll be sure to tell him you stopped by. My mind raced through options. I could call the police, but what would I say? That my stepmother took tickets from her own house? I had no proof they were mine. The purchase had been a private transaction, no paper trail. I could wait for Dad, appeal to him directly, but something in Diane's confidence suggested she had already secured his cooperation, or at least his complicity through silence. For a fleeting moment, I contemplated physically searching the house, pushing past her to find what was rightfully mine. But that way led to confrontations I couldn't afford, potential charges of assault or trespassing that would certainly prevent me from making the trip. So I did the only thing I could in that moment. I swallowed my rage. Fine, I said, feigning resignation. You win, Diane. Enjoy the game. Something flickered across her face, surprise at my easy capitulation, perhaps, or disappointment at being denied a more dramatic scene. That's very mature of you, Danny. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further, and walked past her out of the room. Each step down the stairs felt like moving through molasses, my body weighted with a terrible combination of shock, anger, and heartbreak. At the front door, I paused, took a deep breath, and turned back. Just so you know, I said quietly, this isn't over. Then I walked out, closing the door with exaggerated gentleness, while inside me, something hardened into resolve. She thought she had won, that I would slink away defeated. But she had made a critical error. She had underestimated just how much those tickets meant to me, just how far I was willing to go to reclaim what was rightfully mine. As I drove away from the house, the initial shock gave way to a cold, clear determination. This wasn't simply about tickets anymore. This was about dignity, about standing up to the casual cruelty that Diane had wielded since entering my life. For too long, I had smiled and nodded, keeping the peace for Dad's sake. No more. Diane wanted a war? Fine. But it would be fought on my terms, with weapons of my choosing. And make no mistake, I intended to win. That night, sleep evaded me entirely. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, its rhythmic rotation hypnotic as I cycled through waves of disbelief, anger, and desperation. Around 3 in the morning, I finally gave up, padded to the kitchen, and brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint. Sitting at my small kitchen table, I pulled out a notebook and began to think. I needed those tickets back. Simple as that. But Diane had all the leverage, the tickets were in her possession, in her house, and I had no proof they were mine. Even if I involved Dad, I wasn't confident he'd stand up to her. Their relationship had always been oddly imbalanced, with him conceding to her demands for the sake of domestic harmony. No, this would require strategy. Careful, deliberate strategy. First thing in the morning, I called Mike. I need a favor, I said without preamble. Good morning to you too, sunshine, he replied, voice still thick with sleep. What's up? I explained the situation, not bothering to hide my fury. Mike had met Diane at a backyard barbecue last summer and had witnessed firsthand her particular brand of passive-aggressive dominance. He wasn't surprised. "That absolute witch," he muttered when I finished. "So what's the plan? Want me to slash her tires?" Despite everything, I laughed. Tempting, but no. I need something more subtle. We hashed out a rough outline over the phone, then agreed to meet at Starbucks that afternoon to refine the details. I spent the intervening hours making calls to the airline to confirm my reservation was still active, to the hotel in Atlanta to verify the room was held in my name, and finally, reluctantly, to Dad. "Hey, kiddo," he answered, sounding distracted. "What's up?" "Just checking in," I said carefully. "Have you talked to Diane recently?" A pause. "About what?" So she hadn't mentioned our confrontation. "Interesting. About my Super Bowl tickets. The ones that were in my desk drawer." Another pause, longer this time. "Oh, yeah, she, mentioned something about that." My heart sank. "And? Look, Danny, I know you're upset. But Diane thinks this could be a good opportunity for us to spend some quality time together. It's been ages since we've had a proper vacation, and you know how hard it is for me to get away from the office." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to snap. This was classic Dad, always choosing the path of least resistance. "So you're going? With her? Using my tickets?" "I know it seems unfair," he said, his voice taking on that placating tone that made me feel like I was 12 again. "But we'll make it up to you. Maybe we can help you get tickets to something else, a concert, or..." "It's fine," I interrupted, unable to bear his rationalizations. "Have a great time." I hung up before he could respond, my resolve hardening. If Dad wasn't going to stand up for me, I'd have to stand up for myself. At Starbucks, Mike listened as I vented, nodding sympathetically over his venti Americano. "So what exactly are we going to do?" he asked when I finally ran out of steam. I leaned forward. "I need to know their exact travel plans. When they're leaving, which airline, where they're staying, everything." Mike raised an eyebrow. "And how are we going to get that information?" I smiled thinly. "That's where you come in." The plan was simple but relied on perfect timing. Mike would call Diane, pretending to be from the airline's customer service department. There had been a scheduling change, he would say, and he needed to verify their itinerary. With her tendency towards self-importance, Diane would likely relish the chance to demonstrate her travel savvy, giving us exactly what we needed. I was right. By that evening, we had their complete travel plans. Delta Flight 1422 departing Thursday at 2:15 p.m., returning Monday. Staying at the Westin Peachtree Plaza, just like me, but in a superior king room rather than my budget-friendly double. They would be picking up their rental car, an Audi Q5, because of course Diane wouldn't settle for the economy option I had reserved at the airport. Now I needed to understand exactly where the tickets were. For that, I'd have to go back to the house when they were both there, playing the role of the defeated stepson. Wednesday evening, I arrived at their door with a six-pack of Dad's favorite IPA and an apologetic smile. "Peace offering," I said when Diane answered, looking surprised to see me. Dad appeared behind her, face brightening at the sight of the beer. "Come on in, Danny." Just in time, game's about to start. I spent the next 3 hours in their living room, watching basketball and feigning interest in Dad's commentary on the player stats. Diane moved between the kitchen and her home office, preparing for their trip while casting occasional suspicious glances my way. I pretended not to notice, focusing instead on observing her patterns, noting which drawers she checked, which bags she seemed most protective of. When she disappeared upstairs for a shower, I casually asked Dad about their travel arrangements, expressing genuine-sounding interest in their hotel and rental car. "And you've got everything packed? Tickets and all that?" "Diane's handling all that," he replied, I still on the TV. "She's got one of those fancy travel wallets, keeps everything in there. Tickets, boarding passes, hotel confirmations. Very organized, your stepmom." I remembered the wallet, sleek black leather with multiple compartments, usually stored in her purse. Bingo. Before leaving, I made a show of genuine reconciliation, hugging Dad and even offering Diane an awkward half-embrace. "Have a great time," I said, surprised at how sincere I sounded. Take lots of pictures. We will, Diane replied, studying my face for signs of lingering resentment. Finding none, I'd become quite the actor in recent days. She relaxed slightly. I'll have your father text you when we arrive. I smiled, looking forward to it. That night, I finalized the plan with Mike over the phone. They're leaving tomorrow at noon for a 2:15 flight, I told him. The tickets are in Diane's travel wallet, which will be in her purse. She never lets that purse out of her sight. So what's the play? I need a distraction at the airport, I said. Something that will separate her from her purse just long enough. Mike whistled low. That's risky, man. Airport security is no joke. Got any better ideas? He didn't. Thursday morning, I woke early, too keyed up to sleep. I double and triple checked my own flight reservation, a red-eye that would get me to Atlanta early Friday morning, just hours before kickoff. I packed light, one carry-on with the essentials, my ID and credit cards secure in my wallet. Everything was ready except for the most important element, the tickets themselves. At 11:30, I positioned myself outside their house, parked just far enough down the street to avoid detection, but close enough to verify when they left. Sure enough, at 11:45 on the dot, their Lexus SUV emerged from the garage, Dad at the wheel, Diane in the passenger seat. I followed at a safe distance, careful to stay several cars behind, my pulse quickening as we approached the airport. The plan relied on precision timing and no small amount of luck. Mike would be waiting at the departure drop-off, ready to create the necessary distraction. I would need to be in exactly the right place at the right moment. And everything depended on Diane reacting exactly as we anticipated. As I pulled into short-term parking, I took a deep breath. This was it. One shot to reclaim what was mine. If we failed, I'd not only lose the tickets, but potentially face serious consequences. But the alternative, letting Diane enjoy my dream, letting her theft go unchallenged, was unthinkable. I checked my phone. A text from Mike, in position. They just entered terminal. Moving to intercept. My hands were steady as I pocketed my phone and headed toward the terminal. Despite the risk, despite the potential consequences, I felt strangely calm. For months, I had dreamed of attending the Super Bowl. Nothing, not bad luck, not a vindictive stepmother, not even my own father's weakness, was going to stop me now. As I pushed through the terminal doors, the noise and bustle of the airport enveloped me. Somewhere ahead, Diane and Dad were checking in for their flight, unaware that their carefully laid plans were about to be derailed. And I, quiet and unassuming Danny, who always kept the peace, who always stepped aside to avoid conflict, was about to remind them of a fundamental truth. Some dreams are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The Cleveland airport terminal buzzed with pre-weekend travelers, a sea of rolling suitcases and harried expressions. I spotted Mike near the Delta check-in counters, pretending to study the departure board while keeping an eye on Dad and Diane in the priority line. He wore a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses, unnecessarily theatrical in my opinion, but that was Mike for you. I texted him, I'm here. Ready when you are. He didn't look at his phone, but I saw him adjust his cap, our signal that he'd received the message. I positioned myself near a coffee kiosk, nursing an overpriced Americano while maintaining a clear line of sight to the check-in area. Dad and Diane were now at the counter, Dad handing over their IDs while Diane clutched her purse, that oversized Coach tote that contained my future. The plan hinged on what would happen next. Mike had been reluctant when I first suggested it, worried about crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. We're not criminals, Danny, he'd argued. But I'd convinced him that this wasn't theft, it was recovery. And sometimes recovery required unorthodox methods. I watched as Mike approached, timing his movements perfectly. Just as Diane set her purse on the counter to retrieve something, he stumbled dramatically, sending his coffee flying, most of it landing directly on Diane's cream-colored pantsuit. Even from my position, I could hear her outraged gasp. Things moved quickly then, Diane jumping back, Mike profusely apologizing, Dad grabbing napkins from the counter, the airline attendant rushing to help. In the chaos, no one noticed me slipping behind the counter, hand darting into the purse, fingers finding the familiar leather of the travel wallet. Heart pounding, I extracted it and stepped away, moving quickly, but not running. Running would attract attention. I slid the wallet into my jacket pocket and continued toward the restrooms, forcing myself to breathe normally despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Inside a bathroom stall, I opened the wallet with trembling fingers. There they were, 2 Super Bowl tickets, still in their original envelope. Relief made me lightheaded. I removed the tickets and tucked them securely into my own wallet, then wiped down the travel wallet with a paper towel before stuffing it into my pocket again. Now for phase 2. I texted Mike. Got them. Moving to exit. Meet at car in 10. Back in the terminal, I caught sight of Diane being escorted to the restroom by a sympathetic airline employee, coffee stains spreading across her expensive outfit. Dad remained at the counter, looking helplessly between his wife's retreating form and their luggage. Neither noticed me as I walked past, head down, making my way toward the exit. Outside, I moved more quickly, reaching my car in short-term parking and starting the engine. 5 minutes later, Mike jumped into the passenger seat, breathing hard. Holy shit, he exhaled. I can't believe we just did that. Technically, I just reclaimed stolen property, I replied, trying to sound calmer than I felt as I pulled out of the parking space. Did anyone follow you? No, but your stepmom is on the warpath. I've never heard someone use that many creative insults about a coffee spill. I almost felt bad for the airline staff. I managed to laugh despite my frayed nerves. They'll discover the wallet's missing soon. What did you do with it? Dropped it by the water fountain. Someone will turn it in, everything else is still in there. Credit cards, IDs, boarding passes. Mike whistled. Smart. So they'll think it just fell out during the commotion. That's the hope. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the weight of what we'd done settling between us. Finally, Mike spoke again. So what's next? I checked the time. Nearly 1 p.m. I need to get back to my apartment, grab my bag, and head for my flight. But first, we need to ditch this car. The plan had several contingencies built in. My red-eye flight was booked under my legitimate name, but from Pittsburgh International, not Cleveland, just in case Diane somehow traced the ticket theft back to me and tried to intercept me at the local airport. Mike would drive my car to his brother's place in Akron where it would stay until I returned. I'd take an Uber to the Greyhound station, then a bus to Pittsburgh. It was elaborate, perhaps unnecessarily so, but I wasn't taking chances. Not after coming this far. Back at my apartment, I threw my pre-packed bag over my shoulder and took one last look around. My phone buzzed, a text from Dad. Someone stole Diane's wallet at the airport. Security investigating. Trip might be delayed. My thumb hovered over the screen. Should I reply? Feign concern? Eventually, I typed, "That's terrible. Keep me posted." Then I turned off my phone. They would likely make their flight. The wallet would be found, with everything except the Super Bowl tickets still inside. The airline would reprint their boarding passes. But by the time they figured out the tickets were missing, I'd be long gone. An hour later, I was on a Greyhound to Pittsburgh, watching Cleveland's familiar skyline recede into the distance. The bus was half empty, giving me space to think, to really process what I'd done. I wasn't a thief. I'd never stolen anything before, not even a pack of gum as a kid. Yet here I was, having just orchestrated an elaborate scheme to steal back tickets that were rightfully mine. Did that make me a bad person? The moral calculus felt complicated. Diane had taken something precious from me out of pure spite. I'd simply reclaimed it. Yet the subterfuge, the planning, the calculated deception, it all felt foreign to my nature. I pulled out my wallet and carefully extracted one of the tickets, running my finger over the embossed NFL logo. Was it worth it? The risk, the potential legal consequences, the certain damage to my relationship with Dad? As the familiar weight of the ticket settled in my palm, I knew the answer. Some experiences transcended ordinary considerations. Some dreams demanded extraordinary measures. By nightfall, I was checked into a budget airport hotel in Pittsburgh. I'd splurged on a shuttle to the hotel rather than an Uber, less traceable that way. In my room, I laid out everything I'd need for the morning. Fresh clothes, my ID, the tickets securely placed in the hotel safe. My red-eye departed at 5:45 a.m., which meant I needed to be at the airport by 3:30 at the latest. I should have been exhausted, but sleep remained elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Diane's face when she realized the tickets were gone. Would she suspect me immediately? Would she call the police? The airline had my name on the passenger manifest for tomorrow's flight. If she thought to check there, my entire plan could unravel. Around midnight, I turned my phone back on, preparing myself for a barrage of accusations. Instead, there was just one text from Dad, sent hours earlier. Wallet found, but Super Bowl tickets missing. Diane irate. Airport security reviewing footage. My stomach tightened. Security footage. I hadn't considered that. Would the cameras have caught me slipping behind the counter? Taking the wallet? My mind raced through the terminal layout, trying to remember where the security cameras were positioned. Too late to worry about that now. I was committed to this course. If they identified me on the footage, well, I'd deal with that after the Super Bowl. For now, I needed to focus on getting to Atlanta without further complications. I set 3 alarms and tried to sleep, but my mind kept cycling through worst-case scenarios. By 2:30 a.m., when my first alarm sounded, I'd managed maybe an hour of fitful rest. Still, adrenaline would carry me through. I showered quickly, dressed in comfortable travel clothes, and triple-checked that I had everything: ID, credit card, phone charger, and, most importantly, the tickets. In the pre-dawn darkness, I boarded the airport shuttle alongside a few other bleary-eyed travelers. No one paid me any attention, just another anonymous passenger headed somewhere for the weekend. As the shuttle pulled away from the hotel, I felt a curious mixture of anxiety and elation. In less than 12 hours, I would be in Atlanta. In less than 24, I would be walking into Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The plan was working. Despite Diane's interference, despite the complications and risks, I was going to make it after all. The thought brought a smile to my face as I watched the lights of Pittsburgh approaching through the shuttle window. The gathering storm of complications I'd feared might derail everything seemed to be dissipating. Maybe, just maybe, luck was finally on my side. The Pittsburgh airport was eerily quiet at 3:30 a.m., footsteps echoing off polished floors as drowsy travelers shuffled toward security checkpoints. I kept my head down, baseball cap pulled low, not that I expected Diane to have somehow teleported here to intercept me, but caution had become second nature over the past 24 hours. Security was a breeze at this hour, and I found myself at my gate with nearly an hour to spare. I bought an overpriced coffee and a stale bagel, more to give myself something to do than out of actual hunger. My phone remained off. I couldn't risk Dad or Diane figuring out my flight information and somehow alerting authorities in Atlanta. It was probably paranoid thinking, but paranoia had served me well so far. The flight was about half full, mostly business travelers in rumpled suits who promptly fell asleep after takeoff. I tried to join them, but my mind was too active, replaying yesterday's events on loop while simultaneously projecting forward to what awaited me in Atlanta. What if Diane had somehow gotten there ahead of me? What if she was waiting at the airport with security? What if they'd already canceled the tickets electronically? That last thought sent a spike of panic through me, and I pulled out my wallet, carefully withdrawing one ticket to examine it. The holographic NFL logo caught the dim cabin light, still as authentic-looking as ever. But of course, the ticket itself could be perfectly real while being rendered invalid in the stadium's electronic system. I wouldn't know until I tried to enter the stadium tomorrow. By the time we touched down in Atlanta, daylight was breaking over the city. Hartsfield-Jackson was significantly more crowded than Pittsburgh had been, a blessing in disguise as it allowed me to blend into the throng of travelers. I made my way to ground transportation, opted for MARTA over a taxi, less chance of creating a recordable trail, and 20 minutes later emerged at the Peachtree Center station. My hotel, a budget chain several blocks from where Diane and Dad would be staying, was basic but clean. Check-in wasn't until 3 p.m., but the desk clerk took pity on my obvious exhaustion and found an available room. I thanked her profusely, resisted the urge to hug her, and made my way upstairs. The room was small but adequate: double bed, desk, bathroom with temperamental water pressure. I didn't care. It could have been a closet with a cot, and I'd have been grateful. I set the room's flimsy safe with a 4-digit code and carefully placed the tickets inside, then collapsed onto the bed, finally allowing exhaustion to claim me. When I woke, disoriented and groggy, the bedside clock read 2:17 p.m. I'd slept nearly 8 hours, but it felt like minutes. Outside my window, Atlanta's skyline shimmered in the afternoon sun, a reminder that I was really here, hundreds of miles from home, one day away from my dream. I showered, changed into fresh clothes, and ventured out in search of food. The area around my hotel was bustling with fellow football fans, many already wearing team colors and jerseys, despite the game being a day away. The energy was infectious, and I found myself smiling as I joined the crowd flowing toward Centennial Olympic Park, where pre-game festivities were underway. The NFL Experience, a massive interactive theme park dedicated to all things football, occupied much of the park. Jumbotrons displayed highlights from past Super Bowls, music pumped from speakers hidden in trees, and food vendors hawked everything from typical stadium fare to upscale local cuisine. I splurged on a gourmet burger, finding a seat at a picnic table where I could people watch while eating. Families, groups of friends, couples, everyone around me shared the same excited anticipation, discussing predictions for tomorrow's game, debating player stats, comparing the outrageous prices they'd paid for tickets. I listened, content to absorb their enthusiasm without participating. My journey here had been decidedly more dramatic than most, and I wasn't quite ready to share that story with strangers. After eating, I wandered through interactive exhibits, testing my throwing arm against digital NFL quarterbacks and attempting field goals through virtual goalposts. It was exactly the kind of touristy nonsense I'd normally avoid, but today it felt right, part of the full Super Bowl experience I'd dreamed about for months. As afternoon bled into evening, my phone, which I'd finally turned back on, buzzed with a text from Mike. "Any sign of the enemy?" I smiled at his dramatic phrasing. "None. Everything good on your end?" "All clear. Your car is safely hidden at my brother's. No sign of cops or angry stepmothers at your apartment." Relief washed over me. Perhaps I'd overestimated Diane's vindictiveness. Maybe she and Dad had simply purchased new tickets, they certainly had the financial means, and were enjoying the same pregame activities as me, just in more upscale surroundings. That thought was immediately tested when my phone rang, Dad's name flashing on the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won out. "Hello? Where are you?" His voice was tight with anger, a tone I'd rarely heard from my typically easygoing father. "At home," I lied smoothly. "Why?" "Don't." The word was clipped, final. "Airport security found you on the cameras, Danny. Taking Diane's wallet. Taking our tickets." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Stop lying." Now he sounded more tired than angry. "Diane wants to press charges. Theft. Maybe fraud for using the tickets. I've been talking her down all day, but she's determined." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "They were my tickets, Dad. I saved for 8 months. She took them from me first." "That's not," he stopped, sighed. "That's not how she tells it." "Of course not." Bitterness crept into my voice despite my efforts to remain calm. "She never does anything wrong, does she? Saint Diane, always the victim." "Danny, no." Now it was my turn to cut him off. "For once in your life, stand up to her. Those tickets were mine. She stole them because she could, because she knew you wouldn't stop her. And now you're calling to, what? Scare me into returning them? It's too late. I'm already in Atlanta." Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter. "She's contacted the stadium security. Given them your name, your description. They'll be watching for you." The cold weight expanded, threatening to consume me from within. "Why are you telling me this?" Another pause. "Because you're my son." The simplicity of that answer knocked the wind from me. After all the disappointment, all the times he'd chosen Diane's happiness over my own, here was this small act of defiance, a warning, a chance to prepare. "Thanks," I managed, throat tight. "I have to go." Danny, I ended the call, staring at the darkened screen for several long moments. Stadium security would be watching for me. Diane was pressing charges. My dream weekend was rapidly becoming a nightmare. But I wasn't giving up. Not after everything I'd done to get here. I'd come too far, risked too much. If I needed to find another way into the stadium, I would. If I needed to disguise myself, I would. One way or another, I was going to see this game. Back at my hotel, I retrieved the tickets from the safe and examined them carefully. They were physical tickets, not electronic, that gave me an advantage. Stadium security might be looking for someone matching my description trying to enter with tickets registered to Diane, but they wouldn't be able to electronically flag the tickets themselves. I needed a new plan. Something that would get me past security without being identified. I paced the small hotel room, considering and discarding ideas. Disguise? Too obvious. Scalp these tickets and buy different ones? Too risky, and I didn't have the cash for the exorbitant last-minute prices. Sneak in through a service entrance? That was just asking to get arrested. As darkness fell over Atlanta, I found myself sitting on the edge of the bed, tickets in hand, paralyzed by indecision. The clock was ticking down. In less than 18 hours, the game would kick off. After 8 months of dreaming, saving, planning, and now this desperate gambit to reclaim what was rightfully mine, I was facing the very real possibility of watching the Super Bowl from my hotel room TV, or worse, from a holding cell in an Atlanta police station. My phone lit up with a notification from the NFL Experience app I'd downloaded earlier, a reminder about tomorrow's events, including stadium entry times. I almost dismissed it when something caught my eye, an advertisement for official team merchandise available at the NFL shop in the park. An idea began to form. Not a perfect plan, but better than nothing. I grabbed my jacket and headed back out into the Atlanta night, the electricity of Game E vibrating through the crowded streets. If I couldn't avoid security entirely, perhaps I could give them a different target to look for. The day of reckoning had arrived earlier than expected. But I wasn't about to let Diane win, not again. Not this time. Tomorrow would be the culmination of my long journey, one way or another. And I intended to be inside that stadium when the coin toss began, regardless of who tried to stop me. Super Bowl Sunday dawned clear and crisp in Atlanta, the kind of perfect February day that seemed designed specifically for football. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through contingency plans and worst-case scenarios. By 7 a.m., I'd abandoned any pretense of rest and started preparing for what would either be the culmination of my dream or an exercise in spectacular public failure. The night before, I'd visited the NFL shop and spent more than I could afford on team merchandise, specifically, items supporting the team I knew Diane actively disliked. Dad had mentioned once that she found the Eagles fans particularly obnoxious after an encounter at a previous game. So Eagles gear it was, jersey, hat, even temporary face tattoos in the team colors. Now, standing before the hotel bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. The jersey, several sizes too large, hung loosely on my frame. The hat was pulled low over my eyes, and the temporary tattoos adorned my cheeks with stylized eagle wings. I'd even purchased non-prescription glasses with thick black frames, completing the transformation from ordinary Danny to overzealous Philadelphia fan. I checked the time. 8:37 a.m. Stadium gates wouldn't open until noon for the 6:30 p.m. kickoff, but I wanted to arrive early, to blend in with the first wave of excited fans rather than stand out in a smaller crowd. I retrieved the tickets from the safe one last time, confirming they were still there, still real, before carefully placing them in my wallet. My phone had remained silent since Dad's call. Part of me expected, hoped, he might reach out again, perhaps with news that Diane had reconsidered pressing charges. But there was nothing. I turned the phone off entirely and slipped it into my pocket. Whatever happened today, I didn't want interruptions. The streets surrounding Mercedes-Benz Stadium were already filling with fans when I emerged from the MARTA station shortly after 10 a.m. I joined the flow, keeping my head down while simultaneously trying to appear as just another excited attendee. Food trucks and merchandise stands lined the approaches, doing brisk business despite the early hour. The air smelled of grilling meat and frying dough, punctuated by occasional whiffs of beer from tailgaters who'd started celebrating at dawn. Security checkpoints had been established at strategic distances from the stadium itself, creating concentric rings of increasing scrutiny. I approached the outermost one, heart rate accelerating as I joined the line. 2 police officers flanked by private security personnel were checking bags and occasionally IDs, looking more for weapons and contraband than for specific individuals. I held my breath as I reached the front, but the officer barely glanced at me, waving me through after a cursory check of my small backpack. First hurdle cleared. I allowed myself a small sigh of relief as I moved deeper into the festival atmosphere surrounding the stadium. The next several hours passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. I wandered through sponsor activations, watched performances on satellite stages, and even stood in line for a free commemorative photo, all while keeping an eye out for Diane or stadium security who might be looking specifically for me. Twice I spotted individuals who might have been plainclothes security scanning the crowd, and each time I turned away, busying myself with the nearest distraction until they passed. By 11:30, crowds were gathering near the stadium entrances, eager to be among the first inside. I positioned myself in a middle section of one line, not too close to the front where I might attract attention, not too far back where I'd stand out as stragglers were processed. Around me, fans chatted excitedly, comparing predictions and personal journeys to this moment. I nodded along, offering occasional monosyllabic agreements while keeping my face partially obscured by my oversized hat. At precisely noon, the gates opened and the lines began to move. My palms sweated as I inched forward, the massive stadium growing larger with each step. I rehearsed my plan silently, act confident but not conspicuous, have ticket ready, make minimal eye contact, move quickly once inside. Simple enough in theory. As I approached the ticket checkpoint, I spotted them, a security supervisor showing something to the staff scanning tickets. From this distance, I couldn't see what they were looking at, but my instincts screamed that it was my description, perhaps even a photo pulled from airport security footage. They were stationed at my entrance, right where I was headed. Too late to change course without looking suspicious. I was committed now, the line propelling me forward like a conveyor belt. I adjusted my hat lower, hunched my shoulders slightly to alter my posture, and rehearsed speaking in a deeper voice than my natural tone. 5 people ahead of me. 4. 3. I could now clearly see the security supervisor pointing at a phone screen, ticket scanners nodding in understanding. 2 people ahead. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. 1 person ahead. And then it was my turn. I stepped forward, ticket extended, eyes focused on a point just past the scanner's shoulder. "Enjoy the game," the attendant said automatically, barely looking at me as she scanned my ticket. The machine beeped its approval, and she waved me through. I was in. Just like that, no alarms, no security tackle, no dramatic confrontation. I walked forward in a daze, half expecting someone to grab my shoulder at any moment. But no one did. I had actually made it inside. The interior of Mercedes-Benz Stadium was even more impressive than I'd imagined. Soaring ceilings, massive video boards, the smell of popcorn and excitement mingling in the air-conditioned space. I allowed myself to be carried along by the crowd, moving deeper into the building, putting more distance between myself and the entrance. Only when I reached a relatively quiet concourse did I permit myself a moment to process what had just happened. I'd done it. After 8 months of saving, after Diane's theft, after airport heists and disguises and fear of arrest, I was actually here, inside the stadium, hours away from watching the Super Bowl in person. I checked my ticket for my seat location, then consulted a nearby map. Section 142, row 27, seat 8. Not the best seats in the house by any means, but I didn't care. I could be in the very last row of the uppermost section and still be thrilled just to be present. Making my way toward my section, I remained vigilant, still half expecting to be intercepted. But as minutes passed without incident, I gradually allowed myself to relax, to begin absorbing the atmosphere I'd dreamed about for so long. I found my seat easily, settling in just as other early arrivals were doing the same around me. The stadium was still mostly empty, the field below being prepared by grounds crews for the evening's contest. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't anticipated, almost reverential, like watching stagehands prepare for a Broadway show, the quiet before the spectacle. Over the next several hours, the stadium gradually filled, energy building with each arriving fan. I sipped an overpriced beer, chatted casually with my seatmates, a father and son from Seattle who'd made the trip as a graduation present, and marveled at the growing roar of the crowd. By the time the pregame festivities began, the noise was physically palpable, a living thing that ebbed and flowed with each announcement and video package. My phone remained off in my pocket. Whatever was happening with Diane and Dad, whatever consequences awaited me back in Cleveland, all of it could wait until tomorrow. Today belonged to me, to this moment I'd sacrificed and schemed for. When the teams finally emerged from the tunnels to deafening cheers, I found myself on my feet with everyone else, shouting until my throat hurt. The national anthem, the coin toss, the kickoff, each moment etched itself into my memory with crystal clarity. This was everything I'd imagined and more, the energy of 70,000 fans creating an atmosphere that no television broadcast could ever capture. As the first quarter unfolded below, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me here. Not just the dramatic events of the past few days, but the months of saving every dollar, of researching ticket prices and travel options, of dreaming about this precise moment. I thought about Diane's casual cruelty, about Dad's complicity, about my own transformation from someone who avoided conflict to someone willing to orchestrate an airport heist to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Would there be consequences when I returned to Cleveland? Almost certainly. Diane wasn't the type to let things go, especially when her pride was involved. There might be legal troubles, family fractures that couldn't be repaired. But sitting there, watching the greatest sporting spectacle in America unfold before my eyes, I couldn't bring myself to regret any of it. Some experiences were worth fighting for. Some moments justified extraordinary measures. And this roaring, pulsating celebration of sport and spectacle was definitely one of them. During halftime, I ventured to the concourse for more overpriced food and one more beer. The lines were long, the crowd thick, but I didn't mind. I was part of it all now, just another anonymous fan living the dream. Until I wasn't. Danny. The voice came from behind me, instantly recognizable despite the surrounding noise. I turned slowly, my heart sinking, to find Dad standing there, alone, wearing a Super Bowl hat and looking surprisingly calm. "How did you find me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He gestured vaguely around us. "We didn't. Pure coincidence. I was heading to the restroom and saw you in line." I glanced around nervously. "Is Diane with you?" "Yes, but she's at our seats." He paused, studying my face paint and oversized jersey. "Nice disguise, by the way. Very committed." Despite everything, I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. "Thanks." We stood there for a moment, the awkwardness between us at odds with the celebratory atmosphere surrounding us. Finally, Dad spoke again. "She's still angry. Wants to file a police report when we get home." I nodded, having expected nothing less. "And you?" He sighed deeply, removing his hat to run a hand through his thinning hair. "I'm angry too, but not just at you. At myself. At this whole situation." He met my eyes directly. "The tickets were yours." I knew it, and I let her take them anyway. It was easier than fighting. The admission, so simple yet so profound, left me momentarily speechless. "I'm not saying what you did was right," he continued. "But I understand why you did it. And I'm going to make sure there are no charges pressed when we get home." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by suspicion. "Does Diane know you're telling me this?" A small, mischievous smile, one I hadn't seen in years, crossed his face. "What do you think?" For the first time in a long time, I saw a glimpse of the Dad I remembered from childhood, the one who stood up for what was right, who taught me about fairness and courage before he became so focused on keeping the peace at any cost. "Enjoy the rest of the game, Danny," he said, placing his hat back on his head. "We'll figure the rest out later." Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd, leaving me standing there with my overpriced nachos and a strange, unexpected sense of vindication. Not just for having successfully reclaimed my tickets, but for having somehow, inadvertently, reclaimed a piece of my father as well. I returned to my seat for the second half, watching every play with renewed appreciation. The game itself was a classic: lead changes, dramatic plays, tension building with each passing minute. When the final whistle blew, the stadium erupted in a catharsis of noise and emotion, fans embracing strangers, jumping and cheering regardless of which team they'd supported. In that moment of collective joy, I felt something settle within me, a certainty that however things played out when I returned to Cleveland, I had made the right choice. Some experiences were worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. This had been one of them. As I joined the slow exodus from the stadium, surrounded by fans still buzzing with excitement, I turned my phone back on. There were several messages waiting, from Mike checking in, from Dad letting me know which exit they'd be using, presumably so I could avoid it, and surprisingly, one from Jen: "Heard what happened. Ballsy move, little brother. Call me when you're back." Outside, Atlanta's night sky was clear and star-filled, the air cool but not uncomfortable. I paused on the plaza, looking back at the illuminated stadium, committing every detail to memory. Whatever consequences awaited me tomorrow, tonight had been worth it. Every sacrifice, every risk, every moment of fear and uncertainty. I had dreamed. I had lost. I had fought back. And in the end, standing here beneath the Georgia stars, ticket stub in my pocket and the roar of the crowd still echoing in my ears, I had won.